Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm going to give you a lot of tips and tricks, so please keep following me. And if you want more information and more in-depth workshops, please go to my website. Today we're going to talk about a crop versus a full frame sensor, because a lot of people approach me and ask me if I want to upgrade my pictures, a better quality, do I also have to upgrade my camera from a crop to a full frame sensor? The answer is not that black and white. There are a lot of things to consider, and in some cases a crop sensor is even better than a full frame sensor. The first aspect that you see is price. You see that a full frame sensor camera is much more expensive than a crop camera. It means that if price is very important for you, then probably you can better buy or stay with your crop camera. Another aspect is size of your camera. Because the sensor is much bigger, you also need a bigger mirror. And that means that the mirror housing, which is here on top of your camera, is also much bigger. It makes your camera not only bigger but also heavier, so much more to carry. So if weight and size is very important, then also a crop sensor has the advantage. It's the same with lenses. If you have a crop or a DX lens, which is for a crop sensor, you can see that they are much smaller, also because of the sensor size. If the sensor is larger, then you also need a larger barrel of your lens. So that makes a difference too. And if you have crop lenses right now, an upgrade of your camera will not only be an upgrade of your camera, but also an upgrade of your lenses. So that could be really, really expensive. Another very important aspect is the lenses that you're using. If you are a typical telelens shooter, then a crop sensor means that you have a much different viewing angle, and means that if you have a 200mm lens, that it will become a 300mm lens if you are comparing it with a full frame sensor. On the other side, if you are a typical wide angle shooter, then and you love to shoot, for example, a 15mm on a full frame, then it means that for a crop camera you already have to go to a 10mm. So wide angle users are much better off with a full frame sensor, but telelens users are much better off with a crop sensor. If you are already a user of full frame lenses but with a crop sensor in your camera, then you have another advantage, because the best part of the lens is the middle part. If you're going towards the edges, the quality of the lens will degrade, it will get less. So it means that you are using the better part of your lens. So if you're using a full frame sensor with the same lens, it could be that you can see that the image quality on the outer parts of your picture will be less than expected. Another one is noise. If you are a shooter who is using very high ISOs in dark environments, for example indoors, then 9 out of 10 times the sensor of the full frame camera is much better. If you are comparing it to a smaller sensor, the crop sensor, you can see that the pixel size on your sensor is wider with a full frame, and it means that the noise characteristics of a full frame sensor is much better. So if you're using it a lot indoor with high ISO, then a full frame sensor is much better for you. Another thing is the picture sharpness. If you are comparing a 12 megapixel crop sensor to a 12 pixel full frame sensor, that you can see that your full frame sensor gives much sharper pictures. You have not that much detail as... Nee, dat is gelul natuurlijk. Another aspect that I noticed when using a full frame sensor versus a crop sensor with the same number of pixels is that with a full frame sensor, because of the size of the pixels and they are a little bit further away from each other, that you've got much sharper pictures with a full frame camera than with the crop camera. That's purely based on the pixel density and the fact that camera movement and movement of your subject is much more visible with that crop sensor. When the density of your pixels is higher, then you can see that you got some more problems with sharpness of your pictures, and you have to use faster shutter speeds. I'm explaining that in more detail in one of the other movies with the question, is more pixels better than less pixels? The last aspect, which is in favor of the full frame camera, is depth of field. If you really like a very creamy background which is completely blurred, then a full frame camera is much easier to work with for you. You get much better backgrounds and very nice portraits using that. But it's not only the sensor size which matters, also of course the aperture, but also the lens itself, is the telelens or a wide angle lens or a normal lens, but also the distance between the camera, your subject and your background. But I explain it more in detail in the basics workshop on my website. So please also visit my website.